switchyards at midnight, promises at noon. My name is Julian and my job is to argue with electricity politely. I'm a railroad signal electrician. I babysit circuits that have been out in the weather longer than I've been alive, persuade track relays to stop sulking, and remind lights which color they owe the world. On paper it's schematics and continuity. In practice it's patience in boots. The best days are when everything works for the boring reasons. The worst days are when something works for none. I carry a multimeter scarred with my initials, a lockout tag that won't survive another winter, and a superstition that lives in my left pocket. A porcelain insulator chip I found the day nothing tripped. I live with Ben. He's a luthier. He makes violins and cellos remember their own voices, and he hates when people say craftsman like it's a compliment that ends the conversation. He comes home smelling like old maple and warm varnish, a choir you can wear. Our apartment faces a railway cut where pigeons pretend to be trains and trains pretend to be on time. On the fridge, we keep a magnetized notepad titled Say in Daylight, because we promise not to invent truths after midnight. Some mornings, it's the only thing in the kitchen that remembers. The Tuesday when signals and feelings drifted off nominal, I was in a switchyard at the city's edge, boots in gravel that pretends to be small decisions. The air tasted like coins. I'd opened a bungalow, the little steel house where the railroad keeps its magic, and the first thing that greeted me was a relay rack older than honesty. The westbound home signal had been blinking false red all morning. Whoever wired it thought color code was a suggestion. I traced until the tracing felt personal. When I pulled out my phone to log the fault, the joint email Ben and I use for deliveries blinked across the lock screen. Thank you for your stay, Meridian Hotel. Time, 12/3/01. Points, 200 added. I didn't call. Our rule for anything that isn't yet a disaster is 2 loops around the block before nomming it. My block was the service path along the fence, 200 yards past a pile of ties that always looks like it wants to apologize. I made my loops. The catenary sang the one-sentence wires know. You already know. Ben came home with resin on his cheek, and the look he gets when a plate of ribs has decided not to lie. He set his plane on the counter as if we were the kind of people who could leave sharp things there, kiss the air, then my cheek, then the burn on my wrist from a soldering iron. The third kiss is always the accurate one with him, and saw the notepad flip to its blank side. I held out my phone like a glass of water I wasn't sure he needed. He didn't audition confusion. Yes, he said, hand on chair back like a man using wood for translation. The studio was booked. The client moved up the handoff. The manager suggested a daytime room at the Meridian. I went, with Lucas. Lucas is a photographer who can make a dust mote audition for Swan Lake. Ben admires him openly and often. We worked, he said. It felt good to be possible under a light I didn't glue up. Some currents aren't mine to damn. We need a clear table, I said. Tonight, no phones, no metaphors sharp enough to cut. I have a habit. I turn fear into furniture. I pulled the task lamp from my desk to the hallway console, laid a rectangle of plexiglass on top, slid a short string of battery lights under it that refused to take sides, and taped a sheet of A3 over the glow. I wrote, clear table, one truth, one want, no asterisks. Ben put both palms down. My truth, he said, voice like a string halfway between notes, is I liked being looked at like I was still becoming. My truth, I said, careful, is I'm not afraid you slept with him. I'm afraid you'll write the final label somewhere I can't reach. My want, to want you now, not the museum catalog version of later. My truth, he said, is I want to be seen when I'm still shavings and glue, not only when the varnish forgives. My want, that you want me halfway, fingerprints and all. We added a rule to the fridge, 1 hour without screens every night and a post-it on the table before we brushed our teeth. The first week was a string of small sentences, kiss me without captions, say no without footnotes. Hotel emails stop at the door, and then the hotel wrote again, double points all month. Marketing is a metronome that refuses to hear rhythm. I hid in work. I replaced a cracked feed cable and talked the wayside cabinet into liking its ground again. I cleaned a relay contact with a slip of paper until my fingers remembered softness. I rewired a shunted detector that had started gossiping to itself. Between tasks, I wrote on a scrap, remember water, not the kind that swells wood, the kind you drink when grief makes your mouth loud. That night Ben wrote on the table, I want to be able to tell you when I like something that isn't you. I wrote, I want to offer you more than reprimands. Smaller. I want to offer more than apologies. Days pretended to behave. A kid asked me if trains had birthdays. I said yes and told him I'm bad at gifts. An older guy on the crew handed me a donut he'd kept warm in his pocket. Don't judge the method, judge the result. I left a yard where the weeds were rehearsing being trees and came home to find Ben tapping gray paper to the wall like he was installing better weather. Sunday, he said, let's take the regional to the coast. Arbitrary day. Late return. I said yes the way you say yes to a maintenance window, grateful for a scheduled kindness. We went, 2 hours of noise that belonged to no one. On the beach I thought restricted speed, laughed at myself and let my instruments be wrong. We ate a sandwich too salty and then another humbler. Back home he wrote, I want to be there when you congratulate yourself. I wrote, I want to congratulate you without looking for a ruler first. It felt like both a joke and a field note. The magazine that hires him offered a 3-day micro-residency in a new studio with concrete that pretended to be warm. I want to go for the work, not the hotel soap, he said. I also want to prove I know how to come back. Protocol, nightly voice memo, morning I'm here, no poetry. He left with a reasonable backpack, a shirt I forgive the world for, and a single-serve soap whose label was nicer than it meant. I lived like a system after a storm, orderly, alert, one bad idea from a blackout. The second night I went to the bar under the overpass where a very old pianist plays slow tangos for people polite enough to deserve them. He leaves on purpose, a one-breath lag at the end of phrases. I applauded and left a tip that looked like an apology and felt like a meter seal cut and replaced properly. Voice memo 1. The room doesn't smell like anything, it's almost sad. Voice memo 2. I'm here, plus a blurry photo of a white wall that breathed better than we had. Voice memo 3 didn't come for hours. I rearranged the apartment like I was hunting a frequency. Jealousy has the mechanics of a stuck latch. Then the text. I'm making my no. I told them I have someone. I said I'm not interested in being profitable for anything else. He came back. He set the melon-scented soap on the console. Drawer for things we laugh about without getting hurt, I asked. Drawer, he said. On the table he wrote, let's learn something useless together. We tried whistling in 2 parts. Catastrophe first, then a narrow miracle. 30 seconds of overlap without envy. 2 lines agreeing to carry the same current for a difficult inch. I don't want to be heroic. I want to be exact. Some evenings I open the archived hotel email the way you tongue a repaired tooth. Some mornings Ben comes home with a light I don't recognize. I can see the day tuned his frequencies. We sit. We talk low. We let our hands do nothing. Sometimes the table looks like a bric-a-brac held together by tape. Sometimes a music stand waiting for breath. Yesterday, a developer suggested substituting thinner steel and said the word value as if it were a synonym for less. I looked at the river and decided to be the shore. No, I said, polite as a warning sign. On the train back, I watched a couple argue by texting. Their faces were careful and their thumbs shouted. On our block, an old man asked if the scaffolding was safe. Better today than yesterday, I said. I'll keep it that way. He nodded like I'd handed him a handrail. On my way home, I texted Ben. I don't want all your notes so I can own them. I want to know them so I can recognize them. He replied, then look. I ducked into a hardware store and bought a strip of small blank tags. This morning the hotel tried again. Last chance to double your points. I clicked change address and typed hours. I taped 3 tags along the bottom edge of the table and wrote on them in block letters, ME, US, today. Ben put his hand flat on the paper. One truth, one want, no asterisks, he said. My truth, I still want to be looked at like I'm a draft. My want, that you look at me like I'm always in development. My truth, I said, is that I'm afraid of silence but less than yesterday. My want, to kiss you now, even if our hands smell like shellac and electricity. The little lights under the plexi flickered as if agreeing. A freight eased past without making the pigeons do anything they didn't want to. Somewhere a substation hummed its old yes-no and meant both. And the switches of the city, if you'll believe me, decided for one night only to line themselves without complaint.